Welcome back to today's edition of Selling Point. And today we want to take a 30,000-foot flyover look at my book, Sell is Not a Four-Letter Word. Last few months, this book's gotten a lot of buzz. There's been a lot of copies in circulation. And so I thought maybe it was time that I sort of do a flyover. And if somebody has not got a copy of the book yet, they'd really understand really what it's all about. And so this is not a book that's a lot of slick selling principles and how to bat your eyes 3 times and get somebody to pick up their pen and hand them the pen or all that silly stuff. No, the subtitle of this book is How to Earn an Above Average Living While Maintaining Your Integrity. And so I want to talk about that today, and I've put the book together from a lot of experience in the selling world. I took my first sales job in 1973, believe it or not, and have been in just about every facet of the selling and training, sales training universe, since that time. And so I decided a few years before I retired that I wanted to write a book when I did retire from the corporate world. And I wanted to share principles with folks that are entering the sales business, or even those that have been around a long time, to help them sharpen their axe and do a better job. And so I kept a lot of notes. I kept things on my laptop and a few yellow pads where I'd scratch things around that I didn't want to forget. And so I sat down after retirement and put that together into book form, and fortunately was able to get it published. And so realizing that salespeople don't particularly want to sit down and read 30, 40, 60 pages of something in order to get the point about something, I wanted to write the way salespeople think and move. And so I've covered in the book, 116 strategies, 116 different points. I call them segments in the book, and they're put into 8 chapters. So 8 chapters, 274 pages, and in there are 116 topics. If you divide that out, you'll see that that's only 2 to 3 pages per topic, which I call a segment. And so each of these segments gives you a quick, fast-hitting idea or tip or strategy about a particular point in the sales process. And so today I want to run through those and give you an idea how this is structured. The 8 topics, the 8 chapters that I've put the book together with. The first one is called Enthusing. And I wanted to start off by saying, hey, you got to kind of do a checkup from the neck up and make sure your head is right. If you're going to be in the selling game, it's tough. And so in this particular first chapter, I cover 6 topics, 6 segments that talk about things like attitude, enthusiasm, temporary failure, which typically, happens to most of us from time to time. So it's a good way to get the book started and begin to get you mentally thinking like you need to think. From there, I went to chapter 2, which is called Essentializing. And in that chapter, there are 16 segments. And among the things that we talk about there, which are basic selling skills, we talk about temperaments, how to read temperaments and understand that it's important to pitch it like they want to catch it. Empathy is very good trait that you need to have in selling. And again, we're not talking about sympathy; we're talking about empathy. There's a big difference. And then another topic that's in that chapter is never assume. You know what happens when we do that. So totally there are 16 strategies in that chapter 2. The third chapter is called Engaging, and this is where you're reaching that point where you need to sort through your suspects and make sure that they're prospects. And you need to develop an agenda to move forward. And so in this chapter, there are 13 segments, and we talk about things like first impressions, cold calling, prospect apathy, which you'll run into in many cases, how to navigate gatekeepers when you're selling commercially, and persistence, which if you don't have, you won't keep on keeping on. That's why we run into a lot of people that say, oh yeah, I used to be in sales. I wonder why that is. So that's chapter 3. The 4th chapter I call exploring, and that's basically where we want to make sure that we can determine what the pain is, what the need is of that prospect we're talking to. And of course, we do that by various types of probing. And so probing is questioning. And so we talk in that chapter, 18 different segments where we talk about things like body language. We talk about questioning, the different types of questions, when to use them and when not. That gives you a little bit better navigating leverage in the selling process. And then also, if you're going to ask questions, you need to hear the answer. And so we talk also there in a couple of segments about active listening, not just listening, but active listening, and you'll learn what that is. The 5th chapter is elaborating, and this is where you reach that point in time where you're ready to present or propose a solution to the pain that you discovered when you were exploring. And in this chapter, I put 19 segments there. And we talk about things like the ins and outs of features and benefits, which are basic building blocks in the selling world, but maybe a little bit different slant, a little bit different way to look at them. How to sell a premium service. Hopefully, if you're interested in improving yourself and need to improve your productivity, that you're probably selling not a cheap commodity type product, but you're probably selling a premium product or a premium service. And so we'll talk about that aspect in this chapter of elaborating. Also, we'll talk about how to reduce the prospect's risk. That's really what it's all about when you're selling. And then I'll throw in also a segment in there to talk about how to use humor in selling and how much is enough. And so that's chapter 5. In chapter 6, we talk about encountering. And this is where we bump into roadblocks, we bump into concerns, we bump into objections. And there are 12 segments in that particular chapter, and we talk about not only objections and various strategies on how to navigate and handle those objections and concerns, but we also talk about the proverbial TAIs, the think about it's, the stalls when folks rub their chin and tell you they're just not ready to pull the trigger, and so that's a big bugaboo for most salespeople. Also, we'll talk there about how you take next steps when you can't accomplish everything you want to right now. And then certainly negotiating, which is an important part of the process. And then we move to chapter 7, and in chapter 7 there are 15 segments, and there we're talking about how to agree on taking next steps that lead to closing the sale. Because again, you don't want to have an appointment with somebody and spend 20 minutes or an hour or whatever it might be in your world to end up becoming an unpaid entertainer. That's not going to keep you in this business very long. And so we'll talk there about the next steps that you need to do to get you to closing, how you build value, what that looks like to a residential or a commercial customer, the different types of closes that you might use depending on the circumstances or the situations. And then the proverbial no decisions, that takes the lion's share sometimes of the folks we call on is where we walk away with our knuckles dragging the sidewalk when they didn't make a decision and we were not able to nudge them toward pulling the trigger. And then finally, chapter 8, I call expanding. And in that chapter, we talk about 17 different segments or strategies. And these are the ongoing activities that you need to do once you've made a sale in order to push your business forward and you continue that growth from customers that you brought on board. And there we'll talk about different methods and aspects of how you get referrals and how critical and important referrals are to any thriving sales business. We talk about networking and what function that fulfills in today's sales world. And then, of course, bundling of services or bundling of products. Nowadays, that's a given that you're not going to go out there and just sell a onesie of something. But you need to bundle that together with different products or services that fit the need of that particular prospect that you're talking to. So again, in all, 274 pages, 8 chapters, 116 individual products or strategies, and again, remember that this is probably the least expensive sales help you'll ever get. This book sells on my website for $12, no matter how many copies you buy. You buy 1 or you buy 40. And so I hope you get a better idea and maybe or show some interest in at least knowing a little more about that. So go to RobinsonTrainingSolutions.com and navigate around there and see what you find. And if you do decide that you want to pick up a copy or 6, then you can place your order right there and we'll get it on to you. So thanks for listening. We'll see you next time on Selling Point.